Hello, everybody. I'm Skip Alzheimer. Welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime streaming show, where we watch old 16mm films and we scratch our heads and say, what was that all about? That last film was Development of the Smile and the Fear of Strangers. It's a film about some experiments that they did with a bunch of babies where they tried to figure out, like, when is it that babies start smiling, and when is it, I guess, based on external stimulus, and when is it do they start showing fear, and is it culturally affected? So you could see that they were trying to look at different ethnic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, to figure out, like, is there a difference? So wonderful footage. Probably, I don't know if it was traumatizing ultimately for the babies. I hope that they vetted all this. But anyways, it's interesting documentation, and it's something I've always wanted to do, was a film about strangers called Requiem for a Stranger, where I showed all the Dangerous Stranger films, including, and then showing this one as kind of a setup of, like, when are we afraid of strangers? Because, Sid Davis made an entire career based on that. All right, so this is a speech made by the CEO of GE, and you can tell maybe that they had a tough year based on this speech. So here's GE Best Buy speech.
When I joined General Electric, one of the main reasons I came aboard was because even in those days, I could recognize that the people I met in General Electric were good people, the kind one could really enjoy working with. In the 40 years since, I've gained two unshakable convictions about the men and women of GE. First, that no other company in the world is blessed with so many talented people as General Electric is. And second, General Electric men and women can do anything they set their hearts and minds to do, and do it better than anyone else. I've expressed these convictions many times in talking to GE men and women and to outside groups, and each time I have the opportunity to visit with General Electric men and women, this belief is renewed. But there never was a better time than now, 1972, to show what the GE monogram really stands for. As we look at the world about us, people are confused, not just in the United States, but all over the world. People are questioning former values and former standards. We're seeing across the world a change in the whole value system. People want things they didn't think of demanding a few years ago, and they want them all right now. And yet they sense that this just can't be. And the result of all of this has been confusion and doubt. We've seen widespread inflation and too much unemployment, worldwide and right here at home. Inflation is not just in the prices of products and services that you and I buy. It's also in the taxes we pay for the inflated services we demand of our governments. Inflation is a sum of all the inflated costs all along the line. And this is why the creative ideas of 400,000 General Electric men and women can make a real contribution. Fred Borch, or anyone else, can possibly know as much as you do about how to improve productivity and lower costs in your own operations. The challenge is to spin out these ideas and then to take the action to put them into effect. Other industries badly need the kind of improved productive equipment that GE folks build, so that they too can lower their costs, become more competitive, and so build their sales and more jobs for their people. And let's not forget that consumer customers need newer and better GE products to make their lives at home better and fuller. But confusion and uncertainty don't create good customers. And businessmen, sensing the uncertainty of their customers, have been reluctant to make the investments that improve productivity and provide the jobs. And this adds up to what we might label a crisis of confidence. We need to discover once again that a company of 400,000 fine people can move forward faster in improving productivity, in providing the tops in quality and giving folks the very best in the way of service and in going all out to demonstrate that we're good citizens and that we truly contribute to the societies of which we are a part. When we do all these things, we're truly providing the one priceless commodity that's made General Electric what it is today, value. Value not only in products and services, but value in those intangibles that mean so much to the spirits of all people. And who knows, if we do this job as well as only 400,000 General Electric people can do it, we just might provide that spark of leadership that others can follow. And all can march forward with us, with a sense of urgency, with a sense of drive, with a sense of enthusiasm, with rekindled spirits, and say, to hell with the harbingers of uncertainty and the prophets of doom. The source of the single greatest contribution to our business performance is the 400,000 men and women of General Electric. And no one knows better than I what you are capable of accomplishing. It's up to you to light the fuse that can get us and the United States moving again. So, let's make GE the best buy in the respect and in the affections and in the hearts of all who view the General Electric monogram anywhere in the world. For that monogram is really you.
So this was a purchase on eBay, and so I don't have context for this. I don't know if this was shown to employees, was it shown to shareholders, or maybe both. It was, it's like, hey, we're going through a rough time, so we're going to buckle down and pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and we're going to do great. And he keeps talking about 400,000 jobs. So I don't know what that's referring to. Like, usually, because he said it a couple of times. So I don't know if there were a bunch of layoffs or, what they had to do. Certainly, that was probably during a recession. And also, it's possible it was also during a time when Japanese brands were beginning to snipe away at American brands. I'm not sure, don't know, but fascinating nonetheless. I got something. Oh, Kevin, thank you so much for the coffee. A very kind gift. You can buy us coffee at buymeacoffee.com/avgeeks, and we will brew coffee and we will drink it, and we will let the magic that is caffeine wash through our nervous systems. So, I got set up behind me. Oh, I did it right this time. A film on our telecine, and it's a film I haven't watched. So, this is Earthquakes and Volcanoes. It's the revised edition. Enjoy.
Of all the forces acting upon the surface of the Earth, earthquakes and volcanoes are the most dramatic and spectacular. In newsreel scenes, we can see the violence of Mount Vesuvius in eruption. The energy released here in one day is almost that of the first atom bomb. In 1944, a wall of lava from Mount Vesuvius descended upon the town of San Sebastian. Sicily's Mount Etna is one of the most active volcanoes in the world. Eruptions have become major tourist attractions. However, lava flows such as this have threatened to burn several nearby villages. The destructive action of the volcano is like that of an earthquake. A major earthquake in Southern California caused much damage, particularly to this hospital. Earthquakes and volcanic eruptions frequently take place in the same parts of the Earth's surface. To understand why this is so, it is necessary to know how the Earth was formed. According to one theory, the Earth was once a ball of hot gases and molten material. For millions of years, this material boiled and bubbled. Gradually, it began to cool. As it cooled, the heaviest of the materials that make it up slowly moved to the center, and a thin crust of rock formed around the outside. The Earth, as it appears today, is the result of millions or billions of years of change. This is a diagram of the Earth as it might look if you sliced it in half. The Earth is made up of at least 3 different kinds of rock materials. In the center, there is a solid, very heavy iron and nickel core about 6,400 kilometers across. Around this core, there is a thick layer of heavy rock, the mantle, about 3,200 kilometers thick. On top of this heavy rock is the very thin and very light crust upon which we live. This crust varies in thickness from 11 to 50 kilometers. Scientists believe that the Earth's crust is divided into large sections which float on the mantle. These sections are called plates. In some places, the plates move, and when they separate, new material from the mantle fills in the gap. When the material from the mantle cools, it becomes part of the Earth's crust. In other places, one plate overrides the other and pushes it down into the Earth's mantle. The black lines in this map show where scientists believe the Earth's crust is divided into plates. We'll use modeling clay to represent the Earth's crust and simulate its movement. Tremendous forces and pressures acting upon the crust may throw it up into folds like this. In this way, perhaps, mountains are formed. As this folding occurs, cracks appear in the rocky crust, sometimes breaking it down into huge blocks. Where blocks of earth move along these cracks, the cracks are called faults. Here is a diagram of the Earth's light crust and underlying heavy rock. In this diagram, the black broken line represents a crack or fault in the Earth. Over thousands of years, the mountain on the right is worn down. The weathered materials of its slopes are carried away by wind and water to be deposited, layer upon layer, in the lower neighboring basin on the left. The block of earth from which material has been worn away loses weight, and the block on which material has been deposited gains weight. When the difference in weight between them becomes great enough, they move in opposite directions. The block on the right moves up, the one on the left moves down. They slip along a crack or fault. The movement of these huge blocks of earth crust causes earthquakes. Because of the release of pressure under the block that moves up, a pool or reservoir of melted rock may form deep below the surface. If this melted rock is near a fault or weak spot in the crust, it may be squeezed or forced out onto the surface. We call this a volcanic eruption. Here is an active volcano in the Hawaiian Islands. Escaping gases hurl melted rock or lava high into the air. This is called a spatter cone. The temperature of this molten rock is greater than 1,000 degrees Celsius. The rock bubbles and boils as it oozes from volcanic vents. Flowing lava destroys everything in its path. Grass and wood are set on fire by the lava. Hot liquid flows like a river at speeds up to 50 kilometers per hour, carrying everything in its path. The river of white-hot rock cuts its own bed as it races downhill. As hot lava streams into a cold area, it produces great billowing clouds of steam. Many active volcanoes are found lining the Great Basin of the Pacific, forming a great circle of fire. Active volcanoes are also found along the mountainous edges of many continents, and on islands and mountains building from the floor of the world's oceans. We know that these regions mark places where the giant plates that make up the Earth's surface collide and fold as they move on the thin crust. A giant ridge in the Atlantic marks a line where the Earth's surface is moving outward on each side. It is along these lines that much of today's volcanic action takes place. Earthquakes are the results of movements of great blocks of earth crust along the faults. The resulting release of pressure may cause the underlying rock to melt. If this is near a fault or weak spot in the crust, it may be forced out to cause a volcanic eruption. Such action often takes place where the Earth's crust is weakened by the collision of the surface plates. Both earthquakes and volcanoes are evidence of the same forces. The forces constantly at work changing the face of the Earth.
Great. I love the kind of creepy electronic music in the background. Just makes everything, just puts everything on edge a little bit. Speaking of the Earth, here's a film about explorers of outer space, Earth satellites. Enjoy.
In October 1957, the world entered the space age. At that time, a multi-stage rocket took off from a launching site in Russia. As each rocket stage burned out, the next one fired. The last one launched the world's first artificial satellite called the Sputnik 1. The early satellites, both Russian and American, confirmed the work of scientists in many parts of the world. The first American satellite was called the Explorer 1. Its performance, and that of other satellites, was predicted by applying natural laws which scientists have learned through the years. What are some of these laws? Surely you've done this. As long as the ball goes fast enough, it's held out by its speed and pulls the string tight. The faster the ball whirls, the stronger the pull on the string. An Earth satellite is a free-moving body circling the Earth. It is held out by its speed and is held in by an imaginary string, the force of gravity. The closer to the Earth, the faster the satellite must go to overcome the increased pull of gravity. If you don't whirl the ball fast enough, eventually it drops. Let's look at this another way. Suppose there's a tremendously high mountain above the Earth's atmosphere where there's no friction with air. Suppose that on it there's a gun. A shot will soon be pulled to Earth by gravity, even though its speed is not reduced by air friction. If we use more powder, the shot will travel farther before it's pulled to Earth. But a charge that's just big enough will send the shot just fast enough so that the curve of its drop is exactly the same as the curve of the Earth. Since we've assumed that we're above air friction, speed isn't reduced. Therefore, the shot returns to the point where it was fired with the same speed it started with, and so continues to circle the Earth indefinitely as a satellite. If still more powder is added to the charge, the satellite goes so fast that it moves away from the Earth for a while, but then is pulled back and keeps repeating this path. This is an elliptical orbit instead of a circular orbit. If the gun isn't exactly horizontal, the same thing happens. Only a horizontal launch at a precise speed produces a circular orbit. Now, instead of a gun, let's use a rocket to launch our satellite. It's a very big rocket. Since there are no mountains high enough to reach above the Earth's atmosphere, the rocket itself must go that high in order to launch its satellite. Just how high is this? We've learned a great deal about the structure of the Earth's atmosphere. The first 6 to 10 miles we call the troposphere, which means turbulent. This is the dense churning layer close to Earth. It thins out to become the stratosphere, a stratified region that extends about 50 miles up. Then we reach the ionosphere, an even thinner region which extends some 150 miles up. Beyond this, single molecules and atoms thin out into outer space. Earth satellites can take various forms. The Explorer was encased in a rocket shell, which also included fuel for the final burst of speed. At its base, it was attached to other rockets, which would carry it to the necessary height. The Vanguard satellite was shaped like a ball spun out of metal. The first Vanguard satellite was not this big. The satellite shell is carefully fabricated to contain a complex assortment of devices for getting information and sending it back to Earth. This is part of the brain of the Vanguard satellite. Its many electronic circuits are powered by solar batteries. Solar batteries produce electricity from the action of sunlight. They operate the measuring devices and radio transmitters inside the satellite. The information which is broadcast back to Earth is recorded for further study. This is the brain of the Explorer satellite. Different types of measuring devices are sent up in various satellites depending on the information scientists are trying to get at the time. Here is the Explorer satellite, carefully covered, being hoisted to the top of the Jupiter C rocket for installation. The first satellite launchings used multistage rockets, that is, a number of rockets fastened together, each one firing after the other has burned out, leaving the burned out rocket behind. This rocket uses liquid fuel in its large first stage and solid fuel for the other stages. To enable the fuel to burn at high altitudes, the first stage uses liquid oxygen, which is extremely cold.
Personnel should evacuate the area at this time.
Takeoff of a rocket like this requires a careful checkout procedure taking many hours, called a countdown. It is conducted from a nearby blockhouse.
Take up, aim. Count. 10, 9, 8. Ignition. Main stage. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
The early stages of the rocket's flight are tracked by ground instruments. Since we can't take a motion picture camera along into outer space, let's observe an imaginary three-stage launching by using animated models. The fuel in the large first stage burns out after about 2.5 minutes, sending the rocket very high. Then the first stage is left behind as the second stage takes over. In thinner atmosphere with less gravity, the second stage greatly increases the speed and height of the rocket. This stage often contains the guiding devices that put the rocket into the correct path for launching the satellite. Now the nose cone is released. It protected the satellite against the extreme heat of air friction. A motor makes the satellite spin to give it stability. With the rocket at the necessary height, the final stage fires briefly to produce the great speed needed for orbit. The satellite is then ejected, and if all has gone well, it goes into orbit, with the rocket casing trailing it. How high must a satellite go to stay in orbit? At a minimum of 150 miles up, air friction will bring it down in several weeks. At 500 miles or more, it might well stay up for centuries. Our first satellites have shown that the orbits must be higher than we thought at first because of unexpected air density at high altitudes. How fast must a satellite go? This depends on its distance from the Earth. The Moon, our only natural satellite, is about 250,000 miles away and travels at the comparatively slow speed of about 2,200 miles an hour. Closer to the Earth, where the gravity pull is greater, a satellite must go faster. At about 25,000 miles out, a speed of 7,500 miles an hour is needed. This satellite will circle the Earth once every day. At 1,100 miles out, a satellite must go about 16,000 miles an hour to stay in orbit. It will circle the Earth about every 2 hours. So there are many convenient orbits we can try to reach when sending up a satellite. Here is some of the information about outer space that the first satellites radioed back to Earth. Danger from meteor impact, very slight. Density of air at high altitudes, greater than expected. Temperatures extremely hot and cold on the outer surfaces of the satellite, but inside 50 to 80 degrees, a comfortable range for man. Danger from radiation in space, much greater than expected. This is the kind of information which was monitored from the first satellite's radio signals. Do satellites have practical uses? One suggestion is that several of them, equipped with television cameras, can report continuously on worldwide weather conditions. They can also be used to rebroadcast television to the whole world at once. But this is only the beginning. Already, rockets have taken animals into space to prepare for the day when man himself will make the trip. These films, taken in an actual rocket during a trip into space, prove that mice can survive launching and can stand conditions of weightlessness caused by zero gravity, as shown here by the floating ball. Men have been dropped out of high-flying bombers in rocket aircraft to probe extremely high altitudes and high speeds. In a new field of research called space medicine, men are being tested for the hardships of rocket acceleration and other difficulties they may encounter in space travel. We have designed spacesuits to keep up the pressure on the body to withstand extreme temperatures, to feed in oxygen and get rid of carbon dioxide. We are testing men under many conditions that they may eventually have to face in space travel. Already, many plans are being advanced for the coming age of man in space. One plan calls for prefabricated parts to be shot into orbit, to be assembled there into a giant space platform. It will include a great hollow wheel about 250 feet across, pressurized inside with living quarters and working space. This wheel will spin around 3 times a minute. The force of this motion will furnish a kind of substitute gravity for the people inside. There will be storage tanks for food, water, and other materials. Power may come from solar mirrors focused onto boilers. Indeed, it may be possible to focus solar mirrors onto parts of the Earth to influence weather conditions there. Here in outer space is a natural vacuum for scientific experiments, bigger and better than any man has been able to create on Earth. Here, beyond the interference of the Earth's atmosphere, is an ideal observatory that astronomers have long hoped for. In outer space, we can build a spaceship entirely different from any known on Earth, since this ship will not have to contend with the Earth's thick atmosphere and strong gravity. With this kind of ship, we may be able to explore far into our solar system. These are some of the plans being advanced for the coming space age. Fantastic? Who can say? Wouldn't our present uses of electricity have seemed fantastic when electricity was first discovered? We have entered the space age. Where we go from here, only man's imagination and ingenuity will tell.
It's so exciting. Like, that film was made very long ago, post Sputnik, but it's so exciting. It really just kind of makes you go, yeah, space, yeah. Which is not what I felt when I watched Richard Branson go into space. It didn't feel the same. I think that, I think that his program is tourist-based, and it's not the same. Not the same. We talk about billionaires in space. It was billionaire companies in space prior to that. But I still think astronauts, Richard Branson's people are not astronauts. He's not an astronaut. And I think actually the FAA said that he wasn't an astronaut. He certainly didn't go high enough. He actually didn't. And I think that Jeff Bezos also didn't go high enough compared to how high the SpaceX rockets go, because they're actually going to the International Space Station. And I think that they were like much less than that. So, anyways, that's how I feel about space. There you go. You didn't ask for it, but there it was. What do we got time-wise? Let's discover individual differences.
is Janet Peterson, a new student teacher. She has been with this 5th grade class for just a few days. It's a Friday afternoon, the end of another school week, several weeks after that first day when Miss Smith, the regular teacher, greeted the children for the first time. Since the first of the school year, Miss Smith has come to know each of her children as an individual. This has resulted not only in a relaxed and friendly classroom atmosphere, but also in more effective teaching. Robert, friendly and sociable. Ruth, much more cheerful now. And Mark, bright and alert. Elizabeth wants to stay and help after school. Miss Smith thanks her, but explains there's nothing to help with this afternoon. John, still unresponsive and withdrawn.
Let's sit down, shall we? How do you do it? How do I do what? How do you get to know the children so well? Which child? Well, all right. How did you find out about Robert?
Begin by using your eyes and ears. You see him, for instance, in the reading circle, struggling with material that others read easily. Of all the readers, Robert is one of the poorest. Before the class begins, when no one expects to be watched, you watch. You find a few of the children isolated, a few more talking in pairs, and then a cluster of the really popular children. And it is here that you discover Robert. Robert is popular with his peers, and this is something. You look through Robert's cumulative record file. Health, normal. Grade level achievement in reading, very low. All his academic performance low, as you had observed in class. His educational age is low, but then so is his IQ, as you might expect. Robert plays games well. Physically and with his hands, Robert shows up better than he does in more formal aspects of schoolwork. You remember another child's remark that Robert is good with tools. Academic tests never reveal a complete picture of a child's potentialities. Robert, with his limited powers of intellectual achievement, nevertheless has much to contribute to a unit on transportation. You see the confidence and pleasure of a young craftsman. Robert is not a mechanical genius, but he can work better with concrete materials than with symbols. Here is our pattern, and we build on strength.
And Ruth. How did you approach Ruth? Ruth?
Well, first of all, you look at Ruth as you would look at any human being. And your eyes tell you quite a good deal. Her clothes, faded and worn-looking. Her pale face, the eyes with their apathetic look. Her listlessness. And then you find things out from other teachers. You pool information with these teachers. You compare notes on brothers and sisters from the same family, on the same child whom other teachers have had before. You know Ruth's mother is dead, but you know little else about her family. You discover that Mrs. Ellingwood, who had Ruth last year, has visited Ruth's home. She describes the poor neighborhood and the run-down condition of the little house where Ruth lives with her father and baby brother. She discovered that Ruth had entire responsibility for running the household and caring for her baby brother after school hours. You look up the records on Ruth. You find that her IQ is normal, but her academic progress considerably below that of other pupils with comparable intelligence. After noting her poor attendance in previous years, you check the health records and find indications of illness and frail physical health. So you make a date to visit the school nurse to consult with her about Ruth. With the cooperation of the nurse, you arrange through the PTA for Ruth to receive a healthful meal at noontime in the school cafeteria. And then you do something else, which is a kind of observation, but under controlled conditions. You keep Ruth after school a couple of minutes one day on some pretext. You dig into your desk drawer and pull out a hair ribbon. You tell her that you just found the ribbon last night, and you thought of her, that it would go nicely with her complexion. You tell her how pretty she looks. And then know that by using your eyes and your head and your heart together, you've begun to get somewhere with this child. You know that she knows that she has a friend, and that's the beginning for Ruth.
Tell me about Mark.
Mark? You remember an arithmetic test you gave the class not so very long ago. Everyone settled down, and it seemed that they had just gotten well into it.
Why, Mark, that's very flattering. May I have it? I'd like to add this to my collection. And now, young man, I assume you're finished with your arithmetic paper? May I please have it? Thank you.
And you discover that your assumption was correct. Mark is finished, and without an error. Right there was the nub of your trouble with Mark. He was 7 jumps ahead of the rest of the class, and sometimes a jump or 2 ahead of his teacher. All his classwork is flawless, with a quality of ease about it, which is amazing. You have consulted the records on Mark, but they only confirm what you have gathered without them. You look at Mark as you have looked at Robert and Ruth, and you see that Mark is a very popular child. So popular, in fact, that his influence over others is not always desirable. Something happened a couple of weeks ago which brought this out. You had noted it down in the behavior journal. Jerry, who is quite shy and withdrawn as a rule, offered a suggestion on something which a committee was considering. Mark rudely brushed off Jerry's suggestion. It wasn't too practical an idea as you happened to overhear it, but Jerry deserved better treatment. You could see the effect on Jerry, and so there was only one thing to do. Interrupt Mark and check his rudeness. You do what you can to get a fair hearing for Jerry's suggestion. Then you resolve to speak to Mark privately at the first opportunity afterward. Mark had begun to use his social status and his unusual intelligence in a way that harmed another child without his realizing it. The arithmetic test had been typical also. He had finished so far ahead of the others that he had had time to bother and distract them. You made an appointment to talk with his mother and father. You had to reassure them that you had not come because Mark was doing poorly or because he had been bad. You explained the problems of creating a challenge for Mark. School was too easy for him. You showed them samples of his written work, especially in arithmetic. He could do schoolwork now at an 8th grade level. Mark, you explained, was an unusually gifted and intelligent boy. If you could not challenge him, there was no end to the amount of mischief in which he could involve himself. Your continual problem was to keep him occupied and interested. But you talked his parents out of the idea that Mark should skip a grade. That would create more problems than it would solve. And at any grade, the problem would remain essentially the same. Things had to be found which challenged Mark. Mark's father, who was an engineer, told you about Mark's interest and activity in photography. Together they had built a darkroom, and together they had learned the many steps involved in making a photograph. Each picture was theirs, the product of a joint project. He also told you that recently he and Mark had started building a telescope. This had aroused in the boy a considerable interest in astronomy. You grabbed at this information. The astronomy, particularly, you explained, would meet a need of the moment. In connection with social studies, the children were studying the exploration of the new world, which in turn was arousing an interest in ships and navigation. The idea of navigation was proving too difficult for most of the children, but Mark understood it and could make a real contribution. And this was a way of enriching Mark's program, a thing that would have to be done on many occasions. It had been a pleasant and successful talk because the basic ingredients were all there. A good home, intelligent and sensitive parents, and a child with a tremendous capacity. Through cooperation and teamwork, we had found a promising approach.
Oh, poor Elizabeth. She brought her rubbers this morning and now she's forgotten them. Tell me about Elizabeth. You remember today how downcast she was when I told her she couldn't stay and help? Well, one afternoon in the beginning of the year, I made up my mind I was going to pierce that sullen resentfulness of hers. I had made no headway with the child, and so on this particular afternoon, I made up an excuse and asked her to stay to help me with something.
And it worked. Little by little, you got her to talk to you, and you began to understand just a bit of why Elizabeth behaved the way she did. Elizabeth volunteered several times afterward to stay and help. Perhaps it was not so much that you had succeeded with her, as that Elizabeth had found an excuse for not going home. But now, when you looked at Elizabeth the same way you have looked at Robert and Booth and Mark, you get a feeling of why there was the sourness, the hostility, and the isolation. There was one day that Elizabeth did not make a very good committee member. Anger with sudden explosiveness. You could see no reason at first why she did it. Then you remembered that that morning Elizabeth had told you that her parents had been fighting.
You'll take that dress back tomorrow.
I will not.
That money was for the rent. You stole it like a common thief.
How dare you talk to me like that?
Tell it to the landlord.
A teacher is limited in dealing with such influences upon a child.
Miss Harper,
I'd like to speak to you about Elizabeth. How about the day after tomorrow?
Oh, no. I'm terribly sorry. I have an appointment at the hairdresser's all afternoon.
Would the day after that be possible? It's really very important.
My dear, I'm so busy. Some friends are coming to my house, and I invited them so long ago. Has Elizabeth been bad?
Oh, no, it isn't as simple as that. Why don't you name a time next week? Any time after school. In the afternoon or in the evening?
Well, really, if it isn't that Elizabeth has been a bad girl, I don't see why you can't tell me what it is now.
I'm afraid we couldn't discuss it adequately over the phone.
Oh, there's someone at the door. If you'll excuse me, why don't you call me some other time, Miss Smith? I must go now.
Very well.
You had tried to see her mother before. It was no use. You decided that this problem was too complicated to handle alone, and that you needed special help and advice.
Now, tell me about John.
You remembered when you saw John that first day of school. He was so small you thought he had wandered into the wrong room.
Oh, he's in the class. That's John Cooper.
Of all the children, little John is one of the biggest problems. There was always the feeling of something missing from the pieces of the puzzle. You look at John as you have looked at the others, and you feel his isolation from his classmates. He has as much difficulty with school as Robert, but the differences between the two boys are striking. In athletics and physical activity, for instance. Records? They were interesting and revealing. Educational age is low as Robert's, but significantly, his IQ is not a low one. And then something written into John's health record, not by the school doctor or the nurse, but the dentist. Markedly retarded dentition. What did all these things mean? Further clues emerged as you talked with other teachers. When he first came to kindergarten, his mother had to take him home again after a short time. It had been decided he wasn't ready yet for kindergarten. His first grade teacher remembered finding him away from his fellow first graders, playing with kindergarten children. Certainly not typical behavior. Only yesterday you had gone to a staff conference. You had requested it. The principal, Mr. Jones, presided. It was devoted exclusively to the problem of John. Each of us had his say, with varying guesses and insight. And finally, after everyone else had a turn, Miss Black, the school psychologist, began to put all the pieces together to make a pattern which made sense.
As I see John, his tiny size, the retarded development of his teeth, his not being ready for kindergarten, his playing with younger children, the isolation from his classmates, his consistently poor work all through his school career, and his IQ higher than that schoolwork would lead you to expect, all points to just one conclusion. John is growing more slowly than other children of his age.
I'm sure that must be it. But now what do we do about it? How do we proceed with John?
Unfortunately, in the public school system of today, there is no provision for the slowly developing, slowly growing child, such as we have in John.
This is not to say that there cannot be such a solution, nor that we ought not strive hard to find one. In a way, John and other children like him are a test for everything we believe in, everything we are trying to do. For meeting the needs of the child is the goal of education. Certainly it is no answer to put him back a grade or two. He is 10 years old now, chronologically. And, good or bad, that is the way we group our children in our classrooms, on the basis of chronological age. He has enough to cope with emotionally, without the added burden of such obvious failure.
Could we go over all of it briefly so I can be sure to get it all down?
Certainly.
First, there is observation. The teacher must use her eyes and ears. And then controlled observation, where the teacher's head and heart suggest something to her and she tries it, and learns more about the child, her needs and characteristics. The records on all of the children. You find out what their IQs are, their educational ages, other teachers' notes and observations. You check their health records. The behavior journal, a valuable aid in revealing to a teacher the pattern of a child's behavior from the bits and pieces of her isolated observations. You share information with other teachers. Compare notes on brothers and sisters in the same family. Discuss the same child when the other teacher has had the child previously. You try to arrange interviews with parents. This is not always possible, but you try when a parent interview is indicated. When they are successful, parent interviews can provide the basis for the sort of teamwork sometimes necessary and always helpful in dealing with the problems of children. You arrange for a staff conference with a particularly difficult problem so that several minds can go to work on it.
Maybe you could say that you could summarize all of the techniques by describing them as extensions of the teacher's sense perceptions, plus a mixture of good sense.
I'd say that that was a fair summary.
We have seen a number of useful techniques which were used to learn more about children. In the end, we must admit that the experience and resourcefulness of a good teacher cannot always be conveyed in a book or a film. There are no pat answers, no fixed ways for a teacher to learn about and work with her children, nor is there any substitute for fundamental knowledge, sensitivity, and intelligence.
So that was a little long, but really wonderful film made for teachers on how to look at all the kids in your class and kind of figure out like what's going on, what's keeping them falling off behind, where can I go in and help get the kid excited about something in spite of what's going on in their lives. So that they don't get left behind, so they don't get marked with something. I gotta say, my life, I had lots of teachers that found what I was interested in and let me pursue those things in class. So I very much owe teachers a debt. I think we all do, really. I mean, they're more than just glorified babysitters. They really are amazing individuals. Now, there are certainly bad examples of bad teachers out there. I've had them, so I know. But in general, I mean, dealing with a bunch of kids, forget it, man. So we owe teachers a lot. So back to school, think about the teachers, how we can support them, because they need it. I mean, they are doing an important thing for society, and we need to help them out however we can. So all of us probably know somebody that teaches, so see what you can do to help them out. All right, I'm off my soapbox, and I just want to say thank you for tuning in today, and thank you for the coffee. You can buy us coffee at buymeacoffee.com/avgeeks. Maybe a teacher needs coffee, like, or needs supplies or something. Help them out. You can buy DVDs from our website, avgeeks.com. You can also see other things that we have online there for free. And if you like what you saw, or at least were interested, hit the like button. You can also hit subscriptions and get notifications. And as always, we like when you comment and when you share this with other people in your lives. So thanks so much. Everybody have a good rest of your day. Tomorrow we will maybe watch our 1900th film, if numbers are correct. 1900th. 1,900 films we've watched since mid-March last year. So that's pretty exciting. We have so many more films to go, though. But I'm happy that you're here for the journey. Everybody take care of yourself, and we will see you tomorrow.